Lightning split the sky like a knife through black silk. Alice's Mercedes sat buried axle-deep in mud, its headlights cutting through sheets of rain that hammered the windshield like bullets. She stumbled out into the storm, her $1,000 heels sinking into the forest road. Water streamed down her face, mixing with tears of frustration. Miles from civilization, with no cell signal, she had one choice. The wooden cabin ahead looked ready to collapse, but warm light flickered in its windows. Alice's teeth chattered as she climbed the rotting steps. Her knuckles were blue when she knocked. Heavy footsteps approached. The door creaked open. A man stood there holding a lantern, an axe gripped in his other hand. Their eyes met through the storm. Alice's blood turned to ice. Not from the cold this time. She knew this face. Silas Morrison, the stubborn carpenter who'd refused her company's buyout offer just last week, the man whose land she was here to steal. Now she was begging at his door. "Please," she whispered, and collapsed.
Hello, friends. I'm Vera. Looking at that storm gives me chills. Imagine being stuck in the middle of nowhere, forced to ask for help from the very man you plan to evict. Would you have opened the door if you were Silas? Or would you have left her in the rain? Let's see if kindness can survive the storm.
Silas caught her before she hit the ground. His calloused hands were surprisingly gentle as he lifted her from the storm into the warmth of his home. The cabin smelled like pine and sawdust. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting dancing shadows on rough wooden walls. Alice's designer clothes dripped puddles on the worn floorboards. "Sit here." Silas guided her to a chair near the fire. He said nothing about who she was or why she'd come. He just moved quietly around the small space, filling a kettle with water. Alice's whole body shook, not from the cold anymore. In the corner of the room, she spotted a small crib covered with carefully arranged blankets. A tiny girl slept inside, her breathing soft and steady. Silas caught Alice looking and pressed a finger to his lips. Lily," he whispered. 5 years old, bad lungs. Asthma gets worse in the cold." The kettle whistled. Silas poured steaming water into a chipped mug, added honey from a nearly empty jar, and handed it to Alice. The warmth spread through her fingers like life returning to dead wood. That's when she saw it. On the kitchen table, next to a stack of unpaid medical bills, sat a crisp white envelope, her company's letterhead, the eviction notice she'd signed 3 days ago. Alice's stomach twisted. She recognized her own signature at the bottom of the page. Cold, businesslike, final. The bills were marked overdue in red ink. Respiratory treatments, medication, emergency visits, thousands of dollars that Silas clearly didn't have. Rain drummed against the tin roof. A steady drip, drip, drip echoed from somewhere above as water found its way through loose shingles. Silas quickly placed a bucket under the leak. "Sorry about the noise," he said, not looking at her. "Haven't had time to fix it, been working extra shifts." Alice stared at this man, heating tea for the woman trying to destroy his life, who whispered to protect his sleeping daughter, who apologized for his leaking roof, while she sat dry by his fire. The mug trembled in her hands. She should leave. Walk back into the storm. Drive away and never look back. But the wind howled like a living thing outside, and Alice's bones ached with cold that went deeper than weather. She was trapped. In his house, in this moment, in the weight of what she'd done. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney like tiny prayers. An hour passed in silence. Alice watched Silas move around his home, checking windows, adding wood to the fire. Each movement was deliberate, careful. A man who'd learned to make everything last. The storm wasn't letting up. If anything, it was getting worse. Then the lights went out. The sudden darkness was complete, broken only by orange glow from the fireplace. Silas didn't seem surprised. He moved to a drawer and pulled out a flashlight, its beam cutting through the black. "Power lines down," he said simply. "Happens every big storm." Alice felt her chest tighten. Without electricity, there was no heat except for the fire, no light except for the flames. The temperature in the cabin immediately started to drop. Silas checked his phone. No signal. He walked to an old radio on the shelf and turned the dial. Static filled the air. Then a faint voice broke through. "State of emergency," declared out, roads impassable and temperatures dropping to below freezing. "Seek immediate shelter." The radio crackled and died. Alice pulled her wet jacket tighter around her shoulders. Her designer clothes were still damp, and now they felt like ice against her skin. She moved closer to the fireplace, but the warmth barely reached her. Silas was checking his supply of firewood. Alice watched him count each piece with growing concern. There wasn't much left. Maybe enough for 2 more hours. "I'll have to go outside and get more," he said quietly. "In this storm?" Alice's voice cracked. "That's suicide." Silas looked at her for a long moment. Wood sheds only 20 feet away, but in this wind. He trailed off. Both knew it was too dangerous. The fire popped and hissed as rainwater dripped down the chimney. Each drop made the flames smaller. Alice watched their only source of heat slowly dying. Her teeth started chattering, first just a little tremor, then full body shaking. The cold was seeping into her bones, spreading like poison through her blood. She looked around the small cabin. One room, one bed, one couch that had seen better days. The couch where Silas had been planning to sleep. The bed was pushed against the far wall, covered with thick quilts and heavy blankets. It was the only place in the room that looked truly warm, the only place where someone might survive the night. Alice's breathing became shallow. She could feel hypothermia setting in. Her fingers were turning blue. Her lips felt numb. Silas noticed her condition. He grabbed a blanket from a chest and wrapped it around her shoulders, but it wasn't enough. The fabric couldn't fight the cold invading the cabin. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "This place isn't made for weather like this." She tried to speak, but her jaw was shaking too hard. She hugged herself, rocking back and forth, trying to create friction, trying to stay alive. The fire grew smaller. The darkness pressed in closer. Alice's eyes kept drifting to the bed, to the pile of blankets that looked like salvation, but it was his bed, his private space. And she was the enemy who'd invaded his home. She thought about her company, about tomorrow's meeting to finalize the eviction, about how she'd planned to tear down this cabin and build luxury condos where Lily's crib stood. The irony was brutal. She would destroy this place. And now it was the only thing keeping her alive. Her teeth chattered so violently she bit her tongue. Blood filled her mouth. She was losing feeling in her hands and feet. Alice looked at Silas, who was feeding the last wood into the fire. After this, there would be nothing but cold and darkness. She had to swallow her pride and beg the man she'd wronged. "Silas." Her voice came out as a whisper, barely audible over the storm. "I'm so cold. I can't stop shaking." He turned to look at her. His face was unreadable in the flickering firelight. I know I don't have the right to ask anything." Alice continued, her voice breaking. "I know what I've done, what I'm still planning to do, but I'm scared I won't make it through the night." She looked at the bed, then back at him. "Is there space left in your bed?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Alice watched Silas's face. waiting for his answer, waiting to see if the man she'd tried to destroy would save her life. The fire crackled softly. The wind howled, and Silas stood still, deciding her fate.
Oh, friends, pass me the tissues. Silas didn't just give up his bed. He gave up his comfort, his sleep, and his pride to help the woman who held his fate in her hands. That is the definition of strength. He showed Alice that a home isn't made of bricks and contracts, but of heart and sacrifice. I hope we can all be a little more like Silas, kind even when the storm is raging. If this story warmed your heart, please hit subscribe and share the love. I'm Vera, reminding you that kindness is always free. Bye for now.
For a moment that felt like eternity, Silas said nothing. Alice watched his face in the firelight, searching for any hint of what he was thinking. Would he laugh, turn her away, demand something in return? Instead, he moved toward the bed without a word. Alice's heart hammered. Was he agreeing? Or was he about to show her exactly how powerless she was? Silas began removing things from the bed, his work clothes, folded on the corner, a small wooden cross from the headboard, a framed photo of a woman with kind eyes, probably Lily's mother. He handled each item with reverence and placing them in a drawer. Then he went to a closet and pulled out fresh sheets, clean pillowcases, a thick comforter that looked saved for special occasions. Alice watched in confusion. What was he doing? Silas spread the new sheets with precision, hospital corners, pillows fluffed. He even placed a glass of water on the bedside table, next to an extra blanket. Then he turned to face her. "There's no space for us in that bed, ma'am," he said quietly, his voice steady and warm. "The whole thing is yours now, all of it." Alice stared at him, not understanding. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you take the bed, the whole bed. I'll sleep somewhere else." The words hit her like a blow. She had expected him to either refuse her completely or demand she share the space with him. She had been prepared for rejection or humiliation. She had not been prepared for this. But where will you sleep?" Alice whispered. Silas glanced toward the door, where a wooden chair sat near the window, the hardest, most uncomfortable place in the cabin, where the cold wind would hit him worst. "I'll manage," he said simply. "Silas, no, I can't take your bed. This is your home." "You'll freeze to death on that couch. Bed's the warmest spot in the house." He picked up his thickest jacket and an extra pillow. "Besides, I've slept in worse places." Alice felt tears burning her eyes. "But I'm the one trying to take your home away from you. I'm the enemy." Silas paused in his preparations. He looked at her for a long moment, then at his sleeping daughter in the corner. "You're not my enemy tonight," he said quietly. "Tonight. You're just someone who needs help. And Lily would never forgive me if I let someone freeze to death in our house." He walked to Lily's crib and checked her breathing, adjusting her blankets gently. Then he grabbed an old quilt from a chest. "The bed's ready for you," he said, not meeting her eyes. "You should get some rest, and morning will come eventually." Alice stood on shaking legs and moved toward the bed. The clean sheets looked like luxury. The thick comforter promised warmth and safety. Everything she needed to survive the night. But as she looked back at Silas, already settling into the hard wooden chair with nothing but a thin quilt, guilt crashed over her like a wave. This man was giving up his comfort, his warmth, his safety to save the woman who was about to destroy his life. And he was doing it without asking for anything in return, without a trace of resentment. Alice pulled back the covers and slipped into the bed. The warmth enveloped her immediately, but as she lay there, listening to Silas shift uncomfortably in his chair, she had never felt colder. Alice woke to silence. The storm had passed. No more wind battering the walls, no more rain. Just soft birds chirping and pale morning light filtering through windows. She sat up, disoriented. The sheets were still warm. Someone had tucked an extra blanket over her during the night, making sure she stayed comfortable. "Silas?" she called out softly, not wanting to wake Lily. No answer. Alice looked toward the wooden chair by the window. It was empty. The thin quilt lay folded on the seat, but Silas was nowhere to be seen. Panic fluttered in her chest. Where was he? She slipped out of bed and padded to the window. Outside, the forest looked different in daylight. Branches scattered everywhere. Puddles reflected the gray sky. And there, 20 feet away, sat her Mercedes. But something was wrong with the scene. Alice pressed her face to the glass. Her car was no longer buried in mud. It sat on solid ground, as if it had never been stuck. And lying underneath it was a pair of muddy work boots. Alice's heart stopped. She threw on her jacket and rushed outside, bare feet splashing through puddles. The morning air was crisp and clean. "Silas," she called, running toward the car. As she got closer, she could see him. Silas was lying underneath her Mercedes, covered head to toe in mud and grease. His clothes were soaked, his hands were black with oil. He wasn't moving. "Oh, God, Silas!" Alice dropped to her knees beside the car. "Are you okay? What happened?" Slowly, Silas opened his eyes. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days, which was probably true. "Morning," he said quietly, his voice hoarse. "Car's fixed." "What do you mean the car's fixed?" Silas, what have you been doing?" He slid out from under the Mercedes, wincing as he moved. Every inch of him was covered in mud. His face was streaked with dirt and sweat. "Spent the night digging her out," he said, wiping his hands on a filthy rag. "Had to jack her up, change the damaged tire. Engine flooded when you drove through that puddle. Took a while to get the water out and get her running." Alice stared at him in disbelief. "You've been working on my car all night? You didn't sleep at all?" Silas shrugged like it was nothing. "Figured you'd need to get back to the city. Probably have important business to take care of." The irony hit Alice like a slap. Yes, she did have important business. A 9 a.m. meeting where she would finalize the paperwork to destroy his life. And he had worked all night to make sure she could get there on time. Silas reached into his pocket and pulled out her car keys. Now muddy, like everything else. She'll start right up now. Tank's got plenty of gas. Alice took the keys with shaking hands. "Silas, I don't understand. Why would you do this after everything I've done to you?" He looked toward the cabin, where Lily was probably just waking up. "Because you needed help," he said simply, and because it was the right thing to do. Alice felt tears burning her eyes. This man had sacrificed his warmth, his comfort, his entire night to help the woman who was about to take everything from him. And he stood there like it was the most natural thing in the world. Alice stood there holding the muddy car keys, watching Silas wipe grease from his hands like fixing her car was just another Tuesday. Behind him, the cabin door opened. Little Lily appeared, rubbing sleep from her eyes. When she saw her father covered in mud, she giggled. "Daddy, you look funny," she said, then noticed Alice. "Is the nice lady leaving?" Alice's heart cracked. The nice lady. After everything she'd planned to do to them. "Yeah, sweetheart," Silas said gently. "She has to go back to work." Work. The 9 a.m. meeting. The final signatures that would put them on the street. Alice pulled out her phone. Still no signal, but that didn't matter. She knew her assistant's number by heart. "What are you doing?" Silas asked. Alice held up one finger and walked toward higher ground where she might catch a signal. After a few steps, one bar appeared. She dialed. "Jennifer, it's... Alice... I don't care what time it is. Cancel the Pine Ridge Development Project. All of it. No, I'm not joking. Kill the whole thing. I don't care about the money. Cancel it today. Because I said so. She hung up and walked back to Silas, who was staring in confusion. I don't understand, he said. Alice reached into her jacket and pulled out the crumpled eviction notice, the one she'd signed with cold efficiency days ago, the one sitting on his kitchen table next to his daughter's medical bills. Without a word, she tore it in half, then in half again, and again, the pieces scattered like white confetti. Your home is safe, Alice said simply. The development is canceled. Silas stood frozen, holding the dirty rag. But why? Your company, all that money. Money I made by taking from people who needed it more than I did. Alice looked at the cabin, at little Lily, at the man who'd given her his bed and asked for nothing in return. I've been cold for a long time, Silas. Not the kind a warm bed can fix. She handed him a business card. When you're ready to fix that roof, call me, and I'll pay for materials. Lily ran to her father and hugged his muddy legs. Does this mean we don't have to move, Daddy? Silas looked at Alice, then down at his daughter, then back at the torn pieces, blowing away in the wind. For the first time since Alice had met him, Silas Morrison smiled. A real smile. One that reached his eyes. No, baby girl, he said, lifting Lily into his arms. We're staying home.
What a tense moment. She is vulnerable, cold, and in his house. A lesser man might take advantage of this situation or turn her away out of spite. But Silas, I have a feeling he's about to show us what a true gentleman looks like.